Thank you, and hello again, everyone. My name is John Fagan. I'm the CEO of Financial Empowerment Partners. We're a digital payments company, and we focus on inclusivity. I've got some big shoes to fill, obviously, with Norman out, but I have the distinct pleasure of introducing one of our most passionate and interesting speakers at this event, a highly successful consumer protection attorney. He built a career out of fighting for, helping, and protecting individuals. Now on a mission to empower individuals and reimagine everything as the founder and CEO of Blockchains, Inc., I think you'll find that this gentleman, true visionary for our time, has a very unique and insightful perspective on the role of technology in helping us to build the world that we want to live in. After he delivers his remarks, he and I will dive a little deeper into the conversation. I give you the founder and CEO of Blockchains Incorporated, Jeffrey Berns.
Hello, everyone. What an honor it is to be participating in this event with all of you today. And thank you, John, for that introduction. I'm really looking forward to our conversation. Norm Anderson, if you're watching, thank you for your passion, persistence, and enthusiasm in keeping a bright spotlight on such an important topic in this country, and for that matter, the world. The 13th North American Infrastructure Leadership Forum is certainly something to be proud of, so congratulations. You know, I met Norm a couple of years ago. He had flown out to Innovation Park in Northern Nevada, where we spent hours talking about the build-out of Innovation Park, the new ways we plan to do things using smart infrastructure, and the fact that we needed such a place in the US to help to spur innovation. Then COVID hit, and here we are. You know, we live in an interesting time. A global pandemic forever changed us. Thinking about it, though, it was technology and the digitization of the world that allowed us to do some pretty amazing things. We advanced business methods a decade in under a year. Attending events virtually, no longer uncommon. Doctors seeing patients through telemedicine. Classes being taught to students completely virtually. And the big one, jobs that people thought required an office presence every day are now done successfully virtually. As a global society, our ability to keep moving forward was made possible by digitizing many things. And with that digitization, we've realized that the digital world and all that it has to offer require us to rethink what qualifies as infrastructure. Do we now include access to the internet in the definition of infrastructure? And even more importantly, would owning your own self-sovereign identity qualify as infrastructure for the digital world? As human beings, we have come to develop infrastructure that's generally dependable, and it does what it's supposed to do. Infrastructure in the physical world is designed to benefit all of us, and it mostly does that. The problem, though, is that as the internet brought on the digitizing of the world, the infrastructure necessary to exist in that world was given to us by private companies. And the result of that is that we have segregated systems that are owned, controlled, and walled off, benefiting those companies rather than us. So it makes sense that when we talk about a smart city, past performance has been really disappointing. You cannot place smart devices controlled by those systems on not so smart, antiquated physical infrastructure. Doing so doesn't make a city more responsive to the needs of humanity. It just provides more information to those companies. You know, we at Blockchains believe that at this moment in time, a bold new vision of infrastructure is necessary. How do we make infrastructure better with technology? How do we make it work more intelligently? It begins with exploring what's possible when intelligent infrastructure uses blockchain technology as its foundation. Now, as we're on the cusp of Web 3.0, and dare I say straddling the fourth and fifth industrial revolutions, blockchain is the ideal solution. It will allow the lives of everyone to improve worldwide. Not just the rich, not just big companies or governments, but everyone. We believe that it's time to build the world we want to live in, where smart devices all have identities on a blockchain so that ownership of those devices, as well as authentication and attestations from those devices, won't be siloed, and instead will be there to benefit all of us. It means physical infrastructure will take on a life of its own, as trust between those devices and systems will be guaranteed by code contracts on the blockchain. Information will be exchanged, value will be exchanged, and documentation will be recorded in an immutable fashion. And once that happens, there will be entirely new ecosystems with new ways to finance infrastructure, new ways to monetize infrastructure, and most importantly, new ways to bring on a new economy, the human economy. We have an opportunity to stop thinking of infrastructure reactively and instead need to start thinking about it proactively. How do we build infrastructure for the way we want to live in the future? It begins with governments building living labs, institutional money, looking at new ways to build smart cities, and innovation parks that collaborate and cooperate with each other. Let's find ways to invent, to innovate, to fail fast, and keep going until we get it right. Let's create these places as beacons of hope to showcase to the world what infrastructure can be and what it should be. Thank you so much, CGLA, for the opportunity to join you today. And Norm, again, get well soon.
Jeffrey, thank you so much for those inspiring remarks. I want to kick off this question by asking you, why is it so important now that we think differently about infrastructure?
Well, I think we're at a stage in our country and in the world where we really do need to look at rebuilding infrastructure. So do we do it the way we've always done it, which is just keep doing things as is, or do we say, hey, we know how we're going to be living in the future? At least we have some idea, and do we start to work towards that? So if you think of the 3 stages of infrastructure, let's just say with the digitization process, we're at the accommodating stage, right? So right now, people will stick a smart thermostat in their house. They might have a camera system, and they'll put these smart devices. So that's kind of where we're at right now. And where we're going is more of an adaptive type of a stage, right? And that's where we need to start thinking about, okay, we know we're going to have autonomous vehicles. How does that change the thought process on garages? Or we know there's going to be drone deliveries. Do we now start to build drone delivery bays in apartments and houses that are being constructed or rebuilt? And that's the stage that I think we need to start looking towards. But the real place, the real goal is the transformative stage. And that's going to be when infrastructure becomes smart enough that it has identity and can interact with the virtual world objectively, not through some company's software. And when that happens, you're going to see new ways of doing things, right? Infrastructure may be able to attest to certain things. For instance, if I want to vote from home and maybe my state requires that you actually have to be in the house, there could be a device in there that would register that when I voted, I was located in the home. And those are the kinds of things where in the future, infrastructure and the digitization of it will mix and will actually blend together. And that's where we need to go. And if we don't start thinking about that now, we're gonna spend money, we're gonna get an infrastructure bill passed, and we're gonna just do what we've always done, and that leaves us where we are.
Exactly. Are there good examples of this different kind of thinking about infrastructure in other countries from which U.S. decision makers might take inspiration?
I don't think. I think probably. You look at the Republic of Korea, like the Koreans seem to be thinking more in in the 3 stages I said, they're more in stage 2. They're starting to understand that with digitization, things really do change. Maybe you don't need to do things the old way. And I think they are way ahead of us. I think in Switzerland, they're doing a lot of interesting things. So I would look at both of those.
On the subject of digital banking, thinking about it's something that I'm passionate about, and payments and banking the unbanked. Their large banking institutions are worried about disintermediation and disruption of their business models, and meanwhile, policymakers are focused on digital banking, how to make it more inclusive and reach those portions of our community that maybe be underserved, despite the technological gaps in our society. How would you frame these issues?
Yeah, so I think you're going to find in the future that we need banking, but we don't necessarily need banks. And what I mean by that is, I'm a firm believer in digital identity. And if you had your own digital identity, you could control your own digital assets. And I'm not just talking about cryptocurrency. In the future, the deed to your home will be a digital asset that you will be able to control. And it's going to go 2 ways, right? You have big banks who are saying, we're going to digitize and add blockchain, but really, for them, nothing's going to change. They will just now control when you have access to your digital assets. You have companies like blockchains, like my company, who want to give people their own identity, want them to control their own assets, and want a bank to be almost a portal between the fiat world and the digital world. Then on top of it, you have regulators who are scratching their heads trying to figure out how to deal with this and who should deal with it. So I don't know how it's gonna play out. I'll tell you that I'm a firm believer that this is probably our last chance to actually get control over our digital assets is with this technology. And I own a bank, in Southern Nevada, and that bank will be rolling out completely new ways to banking differently. And that will be next year. And the concept behind what I'm doing is specifically to give you absolute control, still give you consumer protection, but give you control over everything that means. When we think about your digital identity, the information associated with that has significant value, and that asset should be yours, and it will be if everything goes right.
And really the technological gaps and confronting how we, in our society and the way that our infrastructure is configured now, we have unequal access. And I assume that is a key part of the way that you're thinking about this, that it has to be complemented. The kind of innovations that you're talking about have to be complemented by the infrastructure that allows participation.
Right, which is generally you'd have to have access to the internet. I always say with identity, my name is Jeffrey Berns, right? And that name was given to me by my creators, my mother and father, who attested to the fact that they named me Jeffrey Berns and that's my name. And the doctor attested to the fact that he delivered me, and the hospital attested to the fact that I was born in their hospital, and the government attested to the fact that this is my social security number. And we went in this system where we had distributed identities. Like, so my doctor would have one identity on me and different information, and that's how we lived our life. And then you have this new invention called the internet, and governments aren't prepared to attest and give you a digital identity. So tech companies did it for us with email addresses. And we've seen how that's resulted. That's now the centralization of your digital identity, which allows tech companies to absorb everything you do digitally. And we do a lot digitally. That information is now the most valuable commodity, or one of them, in the world. So we've tried it. We've tried it in the real world with having individual companies or whatever give us their own different identities. We've tried it in the virtual world. Now along comes blockchain technology, and it is the first time in human history that we can get an identity that we control, that we own. This has never happened before. It's done by math. Anyone in the world can get an identity. They just need an internet connection. And with that identity, it will allow humans to build reputation. And with reputation, people can start to deal directly with each other. And that's going to just bring on completely different ecosystems. So identity is at the core of everything, whether it be banking, energy, healthcare, all of it. Your identity, who controls that and who owns it, is probably the most important thing there is.
We in our communications before this, there was a discussion about esports, and it's, you know, as a parent, very often you find yourself trying to we used to call them video games in the 70s and 80s when I was growing up, and it can be a subject of controversy around the house, who's, you know, the screen time and playing the games, and China actually came out and mandated limits on the amount of time that children can spend gaming. But I wanted to get a sense of how this how digital identity and how this concept of infrastructure overlaps with the very interesting and growing area of esports.
Yeah, so when you think about esports, it's right for a solution where the individuals control their own identities, right? Because if you can control your own identities and build reputation, you can start to stream, you can start to receive money for things that you're doing. So that's one area, right? Once you have an identity, you could enter in tournaments, you could have sponsors, you could be parts of teams. That's where I think you're going to see esports go. The thing about esports and infrastructure, though, is if you think about, everyone's talking about the metaverse right now, right? Which is just a series of digital worlds. But the problem with the digital worlds that exist right now is you have an individual identity that may or may not work in each of those worlds. In this metaverse concept, your blockchain identity would allow you to move in and out of the different universes and games. And that's where I think with that identity, that's where I think you're going to be able to look at limits, and you're going to also be able to look at new ways to raise revenue and money, right? Because we know YouTube, we know companies that take our content are making money off of them. If we could own our content, we could make money, and that whole ecosystem is just it is right for a solution where you own your own identity.
And that is I think leads me to my next question, which is, can digital infrastructure, which is one of the overarching goals of the current bills that are making their way perhaps a little laboriously through Congress at the moment, but nevertheless, can digital infrastructure succeed without digital identities for individuals?
Well, I guess it depends on what you mean by succeed, right? Could big tech continue to get bigger? Yes, but if success means that our digital identities now empower us and not big tech companies, then no. I think you have to have a digital identity that you own yourself, because that would allow you to share in projects, to participate in projects. Like think of it this way, right? And everyone thinks the metaverse is going to just be a bunch of different games, but it's really the next version of the internet. You'll enter into worlds to shop, worlds to play, but you'll also enter into worlds where you can work together and collaborate, because with blockchain technology and identity based on that, you can have code contracts that enforce things, and you can exchange value. And so now you'll have groups of scientists who may be working on, I don't know, the best way to prevent heat from getting into apartment buildings. And if we had digital identity and those sensors on those apartment buildings could provide information to those scientists, now you have a virtual world who's solving problems but using real world physical infrastructure that's responding to them. That only works if there's an objective way to identify all these smart devices. It doesn't work if, you know, Microsoft has theirs and Google has theirs and they're siloed and the information isn't available to everybody. It's time for humanity to be able to look at all this information and use it to better everything, instead of just these companies that are siloing the information.
This is the quantum leap that you're talking about in terms of empowering the individual in the digital space. What institutions have to take the initiative to establish these identities? By implication, I assume that you're not going to say Google and Microsoft will do it willingly.
Yeah, so look, I think, you know, government has to help, but the problem is with government is they take a sledgehammer when they need a scalpel, right? They had a digital identity definition in the infrastructure bill that was pulled out that really wasn't very good. They defined broker in the infrastructure bill that's coming through in a way that could stifle this innovation completely and drive it out of the country. So I think it's necessary for government to start talking to thought leaders and people who are in the ecosystem before they just legislate. So it's necessary for government to get on board, but really I think there just needs to be a call to action. At some point, people are going to realize this is very dangerous, right? We are the commodity and the customer, right? They're watching everything we do on the internet or what we order, and that gives them more information to upsell us other things or to change our behavior. We need to get off of that. We need to control our own identity. Imagine a where John, you had a cell phone number to call me that was different than my mother or different than my son or different than my daughter, and every person had a different identity linked to them, right? They all come back to one, but you only know that one cell phone number. So if I want to end our relationship, I just get rid of that one cell phone number. I don't have to change everything. And that's the difference between owning your own identity and not owning it. And if governments get in the way, or if big banks or tech companies use their lobbyists to gain control over our digital identities, we will never accomplish all that we can with this technology.
And so it's thought leaders like yourself engaging with policymakers that are forward thinking, and perhaps disruptive companies like Blockchains Inc. That are coming to the table with solutions and going to be attracting customers into this into an environment where, as you say, they get to own their own identity, their own destiny in a lot of different ways. In terms of the privacy considerations, obviously, you know, the current situation has a lot of issues with that as well. But how does the concept of this sovereign and separate unified digital identity align with people's concerns about privacy?
Yeah, so it actually is aligned perfectly, right? Because if I control my own identity and I control everything attached to that, the information associated with that, my finances, all my assets, whatever, if I control all of that, I decide who gets to see what. I just don't sign a blank form letting someone see everything. So I control who gets to see my stuff, who gets to interface with all that my digital identity is. And if for some reason I get hacked, it's only my information. It's not a million people or 20 million people whose information was just hacked because it was centralized in one of these big companies. It changes the centralization to be around human. And really, when you think about smart infrastructure, all of those devices are assets of mine too, and they will be digital assets tied to my identity. So my sensor for energy may be able to do something, and I may be able to, my solar panels, be able to trade energy because that's an asset I own, and that what it produces I own. So it's all of that, but I'm the one that decides. I have absolute control, which is really what we want, right? I should be able to say how much my doctor sees or what this person gets to know. I shouldn't just give my social security number and they have the keys to the council. And I also shouldn't have an email address that a tech company can see every email that comes in, every contact I have, and every search I make. So this is the solution everybody wants. I'm not talking about necessarily my company. I'm saying blockchain technology is the solution everyone. It is using technology against big tech. And so I think it fits right in with that.
And what's and just to dive a little bit deeper, have you had interactions with policymakers? You said that obviously this bill that we're seeing is in flux. It's a very fluid situation. What would be the number one message? You always have to keep things simple on Capitol Hill and in the White House. What would be the number one message to policymakers that you think would be most resonant for them on both sides of the aisle?
Yeah, I would stop asking legacy companies how to legislate new technology, right? Because those legacy companies are going to be pushing to make sure they stay on top. I would start talking to organizations that are all about empowering individuals, using technology for privacy, keeping big tech out of it, keeping big banks out of it, right? Because if JP Morgan Chase, and this isn't about JP Morgan Chase, I'm just using them as an example. If they truly are going to issue a stable coin, they're going to control that stable coin. So it'll be like you going and asking when you can access your money. Do we want them getting their hands on our deeds? Do you want them getting their hands on the information that we might be selling to raise revenue? So it's most important that there's other voices being heard, not just those that like things the way they are, who will use this technology to get richer.
And when we put this in the overall context of America's future, is there a road forward that you see? Can we succeed as a nation? Can we achieve a different level of infrastructure and of quality of life in our country without digital identities? What is the alternative?
I think the alternative is that you have infrastructure that may have smart devices on them. You may have drone delivery bays that will be built into your apartment complex. But that itself, that delivery bay, all of those things are under the control of somebody else. So I don't know that it gets better for us, right? So when the thing that keeps me going on this technology is that human beings can do amazing things when they're allowed to, and this technology will allow us to cut out a lot of the noise and the middlemen. And we need to get out of the way of that. We need to find a way to enhance that, to let people start to solve the big problems, because governments can't anymore. They're just too politically separated to do anything big. They're used to putting out fires, not thinking about landing a man on the moon.
That's right. In your remarks, by the way, very, very inspiring remarks, as I said, and opens our eyes and our thinking to the possibilities attached with blockchain and digital identities and what can be achieved. You talk about how digital identities can help with financing and monetizing infrastructure. I want to start with those and just concrete examples on how these enhance that ability.
Yeah, so if infrastructure is smart, then it will be able to start to generate revenue for the owner of that infrastructure by providing information, that commodity of information, right? And so when I say it'll bring on a new age of infrastructure, it will allow people to do some amazing things. Let's say I need to build a road in Innovation Park. It's going to be a private road for access to and from Reno. I could build that road. I could raise the money to build that road by selling a token. And those token holders receive real-time money as the cars and vehicles that drive on that road are paying for every mile. So those cars have identity, they're communicating with the road's identity, the road is owned by token holders, and those token holders will have a stream of income forever based on the cars. So it would be something like that. You'll also, like I said, you'll see in the future, the metaverse will include science, it'll include math, and devices that can respond to that will start to generate revenue for the owners of those devices. So it's the tokenization model works in blockchain because you have an identity, you have a digital token like a stable coin that can be exchanged, and you have enforcement all being done digitally through code contracts that are always running on the blockchain. Those three things would now allow people to start to begin to solve bigger problems and things that they want to do. And so when I say it'll change infrastructure, I think it'll redefine infrastructure. I think it will transform infrastructure into being an asset that exists here and in the virtual world.
It's a fascinating concept, and thinking about how the tokenization, by offering a stake in an infrastructure, a piece of infrastructure, a road, a rail line, a 5G setup down a highway, and that's a way to broaden the benefits as well, isn't it? Because with the smaller denominations of the tokens, you can offer those to retail investors. You can offer those to a pretty broad swath of society. Is that correct?
Yeah, so it democratizes investment in infrastructure, really is what it does. And it allows, during that democratization process, it allows those groups of people to decide what infrastructure they value and then find a means to both finance it and get paid for it. So it's very inclusive if we have our own identities. It's non-inclusive if we don't have our own identities, right? Because then you'd be doing it through companies, and those companies would be the ones that would be getting the benefits, most of them, from doing something like this. You truly could right now sell, well, obviously you have to do it through the SEC and all that, but you could sell a token to do any project, and those token holders have a real world asset that their token represents, a stream of income that will go on forever, and that token now has value and it can be traded. So you're looking at a completely different world of inclusivity at that point.
And so in that world, if someone says, "Hey, I've got a bridge in Brooklyn to sell you," it's
yeah. Think about this. If you had your own reputation, you'd be able to check that person's reputation out and go, "I'm not interested."
Yeah, it's I might like to own a few bridges in Brooklyn, or at least a token of them. Pretty good business.
Oh yeah.
In terms of that is a fascinating thing when talking about ownership, the ownership in the community, and when we talk about the good of society, having individuals empowered to really contribute to the decision making on infrastructure, things that are going to impact their own lives, but also benefit, really hold something, a real piece of that is, I think, I think that's a really appealing thought, and gives people a stake in their communities that they, that is now, more theoretical than tangible.
I agree 100%. It will change the definition of infrastructure, right? Because especially if you merge the physical and the digital worlds, like I believe is going to happen, it will change how we define infrastructure, because are those assets that are virtual now infrastructure? They're generating money, and the token holders will receive revenue that way as well. So the information the infrastructure provides, as well as just what the infrastructure is doing, access to it, all of that is going to provide new ways of making money and new ways of creating new things that we will call infrastructure.
And certainly the regulatory, you mentioned the potential to define, certain activities as brokerage activities. This is obviously, coming into a connection with securities regulations and so forth. How do you make the case that these should be classified differently, and that this is something that the SEC should treat as a different category than your broker trying to sell you the latest IPO?
Yeah. Yep. Personally, I think that the government needs to create a completely different division, regulator to regulate digital identity and assets. I don't think the SEC makes decisions and they try to do the right thing, but you talk about like an accredited investor, right? The definition of accredited investor tends to favor people who have lots of money, have invested in the stock market. But I got to tell you, my 24-year-old son knows more about digital assets than most brokers that I would do business with. He should be an accredited investor and able to buy into that world, not the guy who has $1 million sitting in the bank who doesn't understand anything. So much like I say, who's speaking, it's time for us to maybe look at the fact that the digital world is going to overtake. Everything is going to be digitized in the future. And we need regulators who are looking at it from that aspect, not from, hey, this is how we've always done things. It's the same as infrastructure, right? We'll just keep doing the same thing. We'll just keep defining a accredited investor as someone with money. They have no concept about this digital world at all, but they can invest. But someone with less money can't. Those are the kinds of decisions that stifle innovation, and that's where we're going to lose. We missed out on 5G. Let's not miss out on blockchain.
And the view from Washington D.C. obviously, as I said, it's a very fluid place. One of the things that is a huge problem is just the technological sophistication of policymakers. They don't understand, a lot of them wouldn't understand the difference between a blockchain and a Bitcoin. They think they may be the same thing. Education has to be part of this. There has to be an educative component. And obviously, what is the right way to bring this out into the public consciousness and have people understand? As you say, your 24-year-old son will understand it maybe more implicitly, but he's not the one down in Washington D.C. writing the rules and regs. How is that achievable?
I think that's an age-old question, right? How do you break through all the noise to get politicians to really see things as they are without all the lobbyist voices and all the current systems saying we can't change that? We offer education constantly, and we created a Blockchains 1 and 2 course for high school students here in Nevada to start to teach people. But as far as the government, there has to be a willingness to admit, you guys don't know what you're doing in this area, and you need to start to talk to people who do and get them involved, because not everyone wants the digital world to be a Wild West. We understand there needs to be regulation, but it has to be smart regulation and not regulation that will kill everything, because you're trying to do something that doesn't fit anymore. So I think it's that.
When you talk about the solutions here in the United States, it's certainly hard. And then when you cast your eye abroad, how does a digital identity how does it cross borders? When we look at China, obviously has a very different concept of digital identities than the one that you're setting out, and maybe other countries will have, very, very challenging and different kinds of regimes. How do you go abroad and bring your digital ID with you into some of these different contexts? Is it even possible?
Yeah, so if you owned a digital identity that was created on the blockchain, it works anywhere in the world. Any computer anywhere in the world can be part of a blockchain and verify the signatures, verify that this passcode is signing for this address. And so I think that's really what the beauty of it is, right? Because if I have an identity and someone in Korea has an identity, we could collaborate and work on something digitally together and enforce that collaboration. Now, when you get into countries who, that's not in their interest. Their interest isn't into empowering their citizens. Well, there isn't much you can do, right? Because they can shut the internet off, they can control what you see. So I don't know that we would ever be able to do much with that. Although people do find a way. I mean, they do. Technology does allow workarounds. So even in those countries, there are people who are circumventing, China's rule on digital assets right now.
Well, I think that it's a fascinating thing that the picture you've painted is really almost a geostrategic realignment, one that is, digitally, the digitally empowered countries. We used to think of it as, the free world, right? in the 70s and 80s, and maybe that concept comes back in this different format. And I think that it's, the way that the benefits of this liberalized approach to identities, a blockchain-based approach, can provide, like-minded countries with some real benefits, and in a geostrategic sense as well. It's a fascinating concept.
I absolutely agree. But you're thinking on the terms of the country, which it would be great because we could start working together. But I'm more on the think about this. People all over the world will now be able to collaborate. That's never occurred before. We don't actually know. I mean, there could be people all over the world who will find ways of changing a country's attitude if they can collaborate safely, fairly, and privately. So I do think it's a realignment of the world, and one that we need to be in front of and not behind. You look at China and the digital yuan, and they're controlling everything, but it has got significant buy-in very quickly already. We need to start to think bigger and faster than we do right now.
It's an enormous challenge, certainly as from my seat in Washington, D.C., when the next election cycle is the overriding, all-encompassing, suck all the oxygen out of the room kind of event. But as you say, perhaps it's from the rank and file of the bureaucracies, the staff, the sort of institutional ballast of the hold. And I think that one of the previous, when we've talked about in previous speeches and portions of this forum, talked about an infrastructure bank, a centralized, at least a centralized repository of government and sort of policy knowledge. Do you think that is, potentially could be the spearhead for something like this, an institution that is in Washington, D.C., and obviously is empowered to make policy calls and decisions, but is more immune to the election cycle and has a little bit of a longer arc? Are you supportive of something like that?
Yeah, if it could be done, I'm just not sure that with the way things are, that it could.
Yeah, it's certainly been on the agenda for quite some time, but never
very long time.
Pardon the interruption, gentlemen. I do apologize, but we do need to wrap this session up because we are running into another session.
Oh, absolutely. Well, Jeffrey, I want to thank you so much for your insights. Truly illuminating, exciting, and inspiring in all the best possible ways. And I thank you very much for sharing your time with us.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It was a pleasure, John. I look forward to talking to you again.